Why, good morning or good evening.
Good morning to you and to the listeners.
You're sitting in the wonderful autumn, even afternoon sun, and I'm sitting here in the morning ray here.
No, it's dark already.
Oh, it's darker, really. And you had snow.
Uh, no, essentially, there was no winter, and the
Oh,
previous year I also remember without a winter.
I
There
thought,
was almost no snow
but you
this
had a
time.
little frost and a little snow and a little something going on in Poland. I know I'm jealous because,
Briefly for a day or two.
oh, okay. So it's back to just wet now.
Yeah,
Okay.
or rather dry, I would say.
Well, that's good. I always said I wanted to come back in the winter and do some of the things I do out in the forest and the forest when the mosquitoes are dead or sleeping. Because, so I was kind of hoping for a long winter. Maybe I could make it in April. But well, we live in interesting times.
No doubt about it.
You wrote a couple of new books.
Yes, I'm constantly writing new books.
What have you been?
Tomorrow I will pick up several new books
So what
from the
did you what
printing
what have you
company.
been writing about lately?
I'm concentrating on what's going on with the world, on a process.
That's a
It's
narrow
not a.
field of focus.
Excuse me. Could
That's
you
a
repeat?
narrow field of focus. There's almost nothing going on these days.
Uh, everything is changing,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to look at it not through symptoms, but looking for mechanisms. And recently, I'm describing mostly what's going on with the people, because that's the root cause, I believe, and I'm trying to. Uh, I don't know how understand, describe, and unravel the what's going on in people and how it affects what's going on with the world, so to speak. And I don't know how to say it.
So when I asked you what have you found out is going on with people,
Uh, Bad things. I mean, uh, I'm scared when I hear such a question because I don't know how to say it in a you know intelligible and acceptable way for the people.
oh, you can go for unacceptable. I'm good with that.
Okay, you know, essentially what's going on is I would say, I don't know how to name it. I wouldn't know how to name it in Polish as well, but a kind of decay or withdrawal of consciousness
Yes,
psychologically, and it comes most of the things such as falling competitiveness of countries of productivity and so on, from the generally, if you look for causes of this, it's mostly coming from, it's not from culture as such as the television or smartphones are degrading children and so on. It's not that way. It only reveals what has happened, but it mostly, I I don't know how to say it. It mostly comes from the educational and upbringing patterns that are prevailing in this world. When you teach children in such a way that they are supposed to uh, memorize all the answers to all possible questions and replay them, you're turning them into machines, basically, and that they are unable to solve any problem, to face any challenge, and they are unable to think independently. In fact, and that's the main. if I have to simplify things when I answer this question, but it's mainly it's this kind of problem, and it creates a new kind of men, a new kind of societies, mass societies with people going back to more to the primitive people, so to speak, when where they have the only means of connecting with reality is through ideologies, selective perception, kind of, and it's very dangerous. It's a disaster in the making, I would say.
You are very right. That's very interesting that you point out the educational aspect, because I am assuming, being
Hmm.
optimistic, that the European education and the Polish education is better than what I see in America, where I know it's terrible. And
It's a disaster. I recently, I mean, in the States, if I may say so,
yes,
when uh, uh, half of fourth graders, I mean 9-year-olds, have the have mastered the ability to read and write below quoting below basic level. So it's illiteracy. In fact,
yes.
it couldn't be a greater failure of the system than what you can see out there.
Now I'm seeing over here over the past decades, and I remember you and I are both from a time that when we went to grade school, when there was a test, and there was lots of tests, we would get in a
Hmm.
piece of paper and a pencil and say, write down your answer. Here for the longest time, even in the military today, if we have tests, um, there's multiple answers. So you got 25% chance of guessing you're probably correct. And if I see over the past decades here the dumbing down of everything so everybody could pass, basically making it so easy. And you see that across the board, both from education. What was at the start of the no student, no child left behind, which
Hmm.
means that the smart kids are not catered to, but the dumb kids are catered. And let's face it, the dumb kids, it's appropriate term. Some
Yes,
kids are less smart than others when it
it,
comes to book
it's
learning.
I,
They
I,
might
I
be great learners.
agree with you. It's a sheer stupidity. I
And
couldn't
but we have just
imagine any greater.
yeah, we have just dumbed down society to the point where everyone has to have a chance of doing everything. What was it? The last couple of prime ministers in Britain that said every student needs to go to college, and I'm like, no, no, they don't, because we need someone to build the houses too, and to weld things. We need practical people. And I remember from school there was when I was in grade school there was a there was two lines in grade school where you would or two boxes they would put you in. Are you a pragmatic worker? Are you somebody who knows in wood shop? Are you good at building things, or are you good at thinking theories and writing and the learned book writing math and so on? Are you going to go to a higher education and go to college and be a professor or a teacher, or are you going to go build ships and cars and buildings? And that's sort of the lines you divided people in. It seems
Hmm.
to me that everyone is trying to push people towards a higher learning, but having dumbed it down so everybody can get in, which means nobody wins.
Yes, and it's visible that it's failing. Uh,
Yes,
you, you know, the problem is such that if you go into psychology of this,
yes,
then it turns out that the main problem is is the people. I mean, there would have to be completely different people, consciousness,
yes.
conscious, and because they have no insight into themselves. I mean, I'm speaking. I'm talking about my experiences here. They don't understand it. The core of the problem. They cannot do anything about it. The teachers often say about the patterns of behavior as if when as when asked about the problem and when the issue is raised, But it's as if we would be seen as animals, in my opinion. So the problem is such that it would have to be such a revolution that is very, very hard to imagine in these circumstances. Maybe after the collapse of the civilization, people will start, realizing that something has gone wrong seriously. And but in our, the situation that we have presently, it's hard to imagine any change, because my experience is such that no arguments work. No, nothing described with the language of consciousness. It doesn't get to them. They don't understand it completely, and so it's a very deep problem. When one is making impression, I mean, evaluating the reality, so to speak, on the basis of the general media, the trash media, as I would say, it's not that apparent that we have deep problems here, because nobody is able to see them, essentially. But when we look under the carpet, proverbial carpet, then it turns out that there are mortal dangers created, and this world will not be able to work. I mean, to function in such a way for a very long time.
Traditionally, change will come from extreme hardships such as wars or famines, or extreme events will force people back on track. And it's interesting because what you're seeing over here now, there's an interesting dichotomy between America and Europe right now, because especially because of the way Trump are doing things. And I was very curious to see, to point out the differences and how the media is not working. Here, for the past years, for those of us who paid attention, um, it was quite clear that the mainstream media was absolutely not truthful. Very clear.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm looking at the mainstream media in Europe that's been parroting the mainstream media here, who was lying to us about many, many things. Extrapolating, obviously, the European media is dishonest in its reporting, and you hear it, and you see it is. But Europeans haven't woken up to that fact yet, because there haven't been extreme events there as there has here. And I'm going to say that there has been extreme events in America that has now turned things over. And Trump
Yeah.
is pushing the country, but just the fact that he's firing bureaucrats and people, the fraud and abuse, and what Elon is doing, something that, whether you like it or not, it needs to be done. Because when you have 330-year-old people on Social Security, somebody's cashing the checks. There's a lot of fraud, but it is shaking up the system. And maybe that's the kind of shakeup akin to a war that will wake people up to the seeing the need for change. But
Yeah, but
Europeans,
mhm.
they're still avoiding this extreme conflict.
No, it's. I mean, I can say about Poland, where I live. Uh, I can see similar changes or processes here. Uh, it, they may be a little bit different, but also people's attitudes and perceptions are changing quite fast. I remember I had an interview a couple of years ago. I don't remember exactly when it was, about the changes in education, and there was no response to it. I mean, in the comments under the video, or in emails, and etc. But when I returned to this topic recently, there was quite a lot of fuss. I mean, uh, people start sensing that something is wrong with this world.
What was the
That
change?
and it's going on.
Yeah.
It may be going on in different ways in various countries, but I mean throughout the West. But it's going on everywhere. Less to some degrees, to a lesser degree or greater degree. But it's going on here as well.
But what was the change in the educational policy?
Uh, I mean, there is a widespread perception that the system that existed so far is failing. There, suicides among children in schools are rising rapidly, and so on. Children have deep psychological problems.
Yes.
They are lost, unable to establish contact with the reality, and such a things that I suspect are familiar to you. I mean, as an American, but it's going on everywhere in different ways, on representing different stages, maybe, but it's going on everywhere, and it's the belief in the existing system is I mean, evaporating quickly.
I mean, I studied psychology back a long time ago when before the cell phones. And I know you just said that we can't blame it all on cell phones and the internet, but I think the distancing the cell phones and the internet and digital media in general have created, um, it must have some blame in a lot in a lot of young people no longer knowing who they are, where they belong. So then they polarize in one group or another. It becomes political ideology that is now almost treated as a religion, because religion has been downplayed, and for better or worse, religion kept people rather baseline for many centuries.
Hmm.
But now you have all this, and AI, I'm sure, is not going to help when you call customer service and you have to ask, "Am I speaking with a human being or is this AI?" You no longer know what you have contact with, and young people are being
Hmm.
more and more introverted. Men and women are dating less and less. The statistic was astounding of young
Yeah,
men under 30 no longer having sex.
yeah,
There's not the interactions that the genders used to have 20, 30 years ago. That must have degraded a lot of things. Plus, it has screwed up education completely. It must have.
yeah. The what I describe is, I mean, it's not my idea, but what I describe is psychological regression, and what is the most evident, to be exact, it's a regression in the personality structure. But okay, I will let's skip it. But what one of the fields in which it's most clearly visible are interpersonal relations, which are changing dramatically. you
Yes.
know Adults, I mean parents, have no insight into the children's developmental needs. They don't know them often. They don't know. It wouldn't cross their mind to you know uh, to raise interest in what the children are really thinking, why they are thinking. It's beyond their scope of perception.
The
And
divide between them
yeah, and
is yeah.
and
Because I think go on.
the children cannot establish interpersonal relations with peers or with parents, with teachers, or whatever, whoever, I mean, and yeah, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy.
It is, and it's interesting because I don't want to make us sound old because I mean you and I are barely a day over 25. um, However, when we grew up, our parents could relate to us because we grew up not much different than them, and we could sort of relate to them because their upbringing was, yeah, a little bit different, probably stricter parents, a little bit more rules than we had. But our children now, their divide between how we grew up and how they are now living is so vast There's such a
Yeah,
big difference in their inputs in their daily lives than ours that, I mean, we grew up and we didn't understand why our parents were playing that
yeah,
70s music because it was terrible, we thought. Now our children are sitting with all these smartphones talking to people around the world who may not be people at all, getting inputs that may be false stimuli. Uh, I when I studied just I guess it's a little bit like a parallel of it's a symptom when you look at the transgender situation amongst children. When I grew up and studied psychology, the baseline, the foundation for psychiatry was to take people with problems, traumas, things happen to them, and help them understand what happened and help them be okay with what happened and who they are.
hmm,
Soldiers lose an arm. Help him understand that he can live a life without that arm, help him to live a normal life, help him process the trauma and move on and give him things to live for. From that we now have psychiatrists in this country and apparently in Europe and around the world who are reinforcing children of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old that they are something other than what they are, to me is borderline criminal neglect. It is child abuse. I mean, if I give me a 6-year-old for an hour and I'll convince him he's a cocker spaniel. I mean, children all over the place until it just seems like such a deliberate destruction of youth and of children of the family unit. It seems there has been this for decades attack on the family unit. And I
yeah,
see a lot of European politicians, they don't have families and children. You see people in Davos and was telling us all that we are just not useless eaters, but almost. We are just cogs in their machine. We don't matter. When you have this globalist agenda pushing down on top of this, that we as individuals don't matter, which is very much a socialist or communist construct. We are all one block. We are together as a unit, as opposed to what we want as freedom loving peoples. And no, I matter as an individual. You matter as an individual. That is being pushed aside, or have been at least.
yeah.
Um,
It's a decay of a society, and it also has deep roots. I mean, deep causes, and one aspect of it that is the most dangerous is that uh, it, within the society there are created various groups, layers, or tribes, if you like, that are unable to communicate with each other because they are using completely different languages, you know,
yes,
and
yes,
that's the prerequisite of a societal collapse, by the way.
yes. It is interesting because now I spent half my life living in Europe. I spent half my life in America, and I do consider myself as an American because this is where I chose to be. But I have Europeans that often call me and say, "I saw this on the American news. What does that mean?" Like, as if we are now so different that I have to translate English into European English to explain. Well, okay, this is what it was. This is why he said. This is what he meant. Um, it's interesting how you're right, and left and right has no conversation anymore. It is all division, and you
Well,
see it in the German elections recently, which is interesting because from day one, the AfD has been portrayed as extreme right wingers. And if you read the party program, which I actually took my time to do because it's online in English, well, first of all, it doesn't mention annexing Poland, so you're good. It doesn't, or there's nothing right wing in their party program. If you look back 20 years, it's basically more centrist liberalist party 20 years ago, or maybe 25 years ago.
mhm.
And it seems the common sense of the center have now been pulled so far to the left that the leftists can claim that what was the common sense norm is now extreme right because they have moved, not because
Yeah,
the right.
it's the same kind of a phenomenon as with the Nazis. I mean, they themselves called them National Socialism, and
Yeah.
it was a socialist ideology.
Yes.
A friend of mine called it magical socialism, uh, which
Yes.
is adequate, by the way. Uh, uh, but they are now called, rightist movement. Uh, I, I I wrote a lot of book about the Third Reich, and I see no grounds for that.
No.
So you know I I would propose. I mean, for my internal use, I divided, categorized it along the role of ideology rather than if it if it's leftist or rightist, because in this case it doesn't. It isn't inadequate.
Not really. Um, let me take a stab at something that I always wanted to do because I just don't feel intelligent enough to do it. But you are here, so you can fix me. The difference between communism and Nazism, though, if you want to simplify it, communism seeks to spread, while Nazism is a national socialist. They with
Yes,
the board, although
that
they
was
all
the main. You know, uh, it the distinction was along the line of uh, I would I don't know how to say it, uh, national identity criteria
yes,
in communism, in Nazism. In communism, it was according to belief in the ideology of, I don't know how to name it, Bolshevism, communism, and so on. So the main practical difference was such that the Nazis have exterminated other nations because of the nations that they belonged, the people. But for the communism, everybody was convertible, so to speak, and there was no, national discrimination according to the national, division. Uh, but both in both cases, there was mm, it was based on a idea of a mass society with authoritarian rule. So in fact, there was little difference. It's anyway. I would name it differently.
yes. But I think that is why Germany now have, or German parties are now, well, the AfD. I guess the problem is that the Nazism was about their country first, uh, everything for the country. So now, if you are a patriotic German who just loves Germany and may not want immigrants or debt or destruction of industry, by default, you can now label them Nazis because they believe the same thing, which they really don't. But how does Germany ever get out of this? Because it seems Germany is self-destructing faster than anybody else.
I mean, I suspect, I don't know exactly, I mean, comprehensively, but I, I'm afraid that one of the main reasons of these problems is such that they, they never understood, they never worked it out after the war. I mean, there was a flood of books about, nurses working as anti-Nazis, and because they uh, did something, insignificant, and I mean, they all wanted to see themselves as victims.
Yes.
There was never a realization of the idea that they were the Nazis. You
No.
know, they never uh, uh, go through. I mean, uh, They didn't understand it. There is a term in psychology for this. How you would describe it? Such
Suppression.
a working out, working through such a trauma, for example.
Yes, you can work. Yeah, you can work your through in the different stages through trauma, or you can just suppress the memory and skip it.
They,
Um,
yes, they just suppressed it, and
yeah,
on the basis of denial on a national scale, they thought that they have escaped this reality, but in fact, it's dormant inside of them, and it's haunting them, and it's still dangerous. I mean, there was a movement for a denazification. I mean, effort to denazify the
yeah.
nation, but it was very superficial, and the problem is such that they don't really know why they were the Nazis, and at the same time after that they presented themselves as victims of that, and they you know uh, and it's a missing element in like in a therapy, when
Yes.
you want to go through a certain stage.
It was a
uh,
little bit like going into therapy with a therapist that said, "What you did was bad. I don't want to talk about it because you were wrong. So move on," without clarifying it. The denazification
yeah,
put a lid on any conversation. Still to this day, you can't really dive into the pros and cons of what was done, what was really done, what was done differently than what you've been doing. You can't have any conversation about it. Literally, you go to
they
jail if you do.
yes,
Uh,
they never comprehended it consciously, I mean.
it was just they walked away with a sense of shame without many understanding why, and we're
Yeah,
still here today.
yeah,
Um, it's very interesting to watch how things are going. It's just as interesting to see how everybody have been invoking the Churchill clause when it comes to the war in Ukraine, where Zelensky's was hailed in Britain and around us our time, the Churchill of our time. And I keep thinking to myself, well, Churchill managed to destroy the entire British Empire. I'm like, I don't know, is this good or bad? I mean, would we not have been a little bit better off having a few more who and you see it now when now I have no idea exactly what our president's idea is, but I'm certain he has one. And I'm pretty sure whatever that idea is, it's going to happen one way or another. And the Europeans are now seems to be completely in the uproar that the Ukraine war might end. That now all of a sudden we have a Chamberlain rolling around saying we're going to make peace one way or another. Even if both sides have to give something up, we're going to stop this. Which, if it's from an admirable point of view of letting the dying stop, good, good, so far so good. But now the Europeans, who have a lot of them have slow walked help. It's just like America did, like lots of promises and things would come if we come to the military aid. But why are so many of them now troubled by the fact that peace might break out as a bad thing? Well,
I don't understand it either. you,
it's like,
you know uh, yes, it's strange indeed. I never thought about it, but
they had 3 years of war where the Europeans never sat down with the Russians and the Ukrainians at one table and said, "All right, what do we do to stop this?"
yeah,
No one
yeah,
talked to Putin for all this time. The French tried a little bit. And now Trump is coming in and said, "All right, we're going to stop this. And let's talk to Russia. Let's talk to Zelensky's tomorrow. He's here. Of course, you have to talk to Russia. They're like half of the war. Well, probably maybe a bigger
yeah,
part than half. You have to talk to your enemies to get them on board."
yeah.
And
What is going on in Europe is that the propaganda was set in motion to scare, to present a vision of a war between Russia and NATO, and Russia invading NATO.
yeah,
But there is a lot of ado about it, but nobody, I don't see anybody understanding what is the objective of Russia here. Why the war has started in the first place? They don't understand it. So they are not a partner in a game. So in a way, because in some way it is a game, strategic game.
Yeah,
Uh, it's a failure.
it is. But the game started back in 2014, 93 maybe even. Um, I I don't agree with Trump when he says this was also Ukraine's fault, because I see for the most part, if I'm going to put fault or blame for the Ukraine war, and I'm a little old fashioned because I was alive in '93 when uh, the guarantee or promise of border integrity was given in exchange for the nuclear weapons. Something Clinton had later said he wished he hadn't done, and the Ukrainians certainly wish they hadn't done. Um, but there was the borders; everybody established them, Russia as well, and then there was the color revolution in Ukraine in 2014.
Orange
Ms.
Revolution.
Newland, State Department, were bragging about how they funded these demonstrations. They ousted a pro-Russian or leaning towards Russia Ukrainian politician and put one of their own in, basically. And ever since then, they've been talking about the movement of NATO eastwards, something that was promised would not happen. But
Not to happen. Yeah,
yeah, so I'm
that, 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 that's right. I agree with you.
and the last administration here were welcoming Ukraine into NATO. When Russian troops were massed around the Ukrainian border in 2022, both Harris and Biden said, we welcome you into NATO, but they were pushing for Ukraine fast track into NATO. If anything ever spurred on, I'm not saying invasion of another country is always wrong. Russia was wrong. They invaded another country. But they were given the motivation to do so by the NATO expansionism. At least if you need an excuse to kick somebody's door in, they got the excuse. We gave them that excuse.
Yes,
And the Europeans,
such a guarantees.
yeah,
I mean, to let them into the NATO was irresponsible because
yeah,
it was, on the other hand, there was no clear, I mean, realistic perspective that they will join the NATO. And in this way, it only provoked a situation without anything in exchange.
yes.
Uh,
And
so, yeah, so something like that.
that's what I said it to the Ukrainians. I know. So I was like, no, I would don't join EU, don't join NATO. Be your own independent country and trade with everybody. Uh, have a strong military though, but I'm very curious to see how this plays out, but it's very interesting to see how adverse the Europeans are taking it when are feeling left out and they're promising war and soldiers and materials. And I'm like, well, you had 3 years, you didn't do anything. Now something's being done, and now you're feeling hurt for it. And I think it ties
Yes,
interestingly into. Well, I have to ask you, what do you think about what the Vice President JD he said at the NATO summit? Because I thought that was very interesting and very poignant.
uh, he was right, in
He
my
was.
opinion. But I mean, to what, which sentence you refer?
Oh, I'm just going to go blanket and say the whole thing because what he said was absolutely right. And the Germans certainly didn't like it because they,
He,
it seems like the global system is being pushed back now. There's a
yes.
pushback to that left the management of decline because it seems
Mhm.
that that's what Europe has been doing, what Germany is certainly doing. They are firmly entrenched with the fact that the country is going to decline. They'll fill it with immigrants. They're going to destroy their own industry and energy sector, and just let the. It seems like they're willingly, slowly, just trying to let the country fall
You
apart.
know, uh, Europe has its deficiencies, so to speak. But on the other hand, what the Trump's people at the summit and later on in Saudi Arabia have said is, you know, uh, disassembling of the Western alliance, and it creates tensions and discord and lack of trust in mutual lack of trust,
Yeah.
and so there is a widespread conviction. I mean, that it's falling apart. I mean, the NATO Western Bloc as such, not necessarily in a military sense, but in a general sense. So it's creating a commotion without understanding. I mean, because they don't understand what the game is about,
No,
really.
they
And
don't. But the destruction
so
of the system have been ongoing for years. Uh, it's not. It's not. It's it. It has been predicted the falling apart of both the EU and the NATO for the past decade. Um, I don't think either of them necessarily will have to fall apart, but I do think they will have to start rethinking their priorities and start taking into consideration their populations and what their populations want. Because I see an overall, if you're going to take all European countries, it is becoming more and more evident to the people that they are being governed by people they haven't voted for. They're being handed rules and regulations from Brussels by people they don't know. Wake up every morning, there's some new initiative, and they're agreeing with it less and less. Mass immigration, obviously, is on the top of that list. And I don't think it is sustainable for the status quo of typical mainstream European politicians to keep waving the EU flag while neglecting their own population's wishes or the safety of their women and children, which is my pet peeve.
yes, but it's a broader phenomenon. I mean, it's in the U.S. The distrust in the political system is also rising, and
It's
it's not only a European
no.
phenomenon. But I generally agree with you, and it's falling apart. In other words,
I always believe that the will to freedom is still one of the strongest instinctive human emotions. And I think it's interesting because what you're finding is that there's been a deliberate dulling of that instinct from the education side and from societal side for the past many decades of instead of having kids grow up with a curiosity of a wanting to know and grow and see and explore, they're being dulled down to an inactivity. Just basically be
I mean,
inactive and sit in your
it,
little booth. And it
yeah,
doesn't work with that instinct to be free and explore and be self.
yes, it's a 19th century idea that when after the industrialization has started, the main preoccupation of the authorities was that they were afraid of the masses,
Mhm.
in the factories.
Yeah,
So the entire educational system was oriented towards accommodating the individual to the society, not enabling him or her to perform to realize its potential,
right.
because it was and it was dangerous for the people that ruled, and it still you know uh, persists.
That's very true. You can almost draw the parallel back to the industrialization of farming and say cotton. Say back to the late 18th century, early 19th century, when you still had farmers that were on the farm. They were working on basically their own time. They were free to work on their farms. You had people making fabric, for instance. They were free to work on their fabrics and sow and whatever on their own time, but they were productive because they had to be productive, otherwise they wouldn't eat. Then industrial revolution started bringing all of this in under an industrial umbrella. Now they are in factories with spinning mills and all that. They have to show up on time. They have to sit in the factory for 10 hours, be bored, do their little thing. The individual was suppressed, and now you saw a rise of in crime at that time, because and you saw a management hard lid on workers, because, well, you have to work on time, you have to do this, you can't do that, you can't do that, and the individual suffered from this. But eventually a balance was found. Now you
Yeah.
see the same thing, where the individual has been suppressed. The curiosity, intellectual curiosity in schools have been stifled by these fixed texts and these fixed teachers preaching for the masses, as you are just a cog in the wheel type idea. Are we seeing a repetition of something that already happened in a greater
Yes,
scale?
but I do understand your idea that everybody wants to be free. But in fact, if you look deeper, it's not completely true, because the most dangerous, yeah, I mean, phenomena in the 20th century came from the very fact that they didn't want to be free. The Germans under Hitler wanted to be hypnotized by a hypnotist, and the same was the case in the Soviet Union or Russia then, or China. They wanted to be a mass, parts of the mass. So I generally accept the idea, and I agree to you that everybody, when you ask individual persons, they will tell you, everybody would tell you that he or she wants to be free. But it's what has been, I mean, triggered or initiated, what is going on presently in the regression is that we have a mass society which is pretty much unable to perform its role in democracies,
That's true.
because they are so easy. Such a people are so easy to manipulate, to control, that they are unable, pretty much. And the one of the I mean, greater problem that it seems at the first sight is that when you have a society broken into various groups or tribes, as it is often called recently,
Yes.
which cannot communicate with each other, cannot see the other people as equal humans, then it's a very dangerous phenomenon. And I sorry, I'm sorry, I forgot what I wanted to say. But uh, um, generally, it's what is going on in society, in the societies, in the Western societies, is described as by the so-called psychology of the masses. It's without understanding it, without addressing the issues, the causes which are causing it, you know I mean, it's hard for me to imagine, and I'm saying it on the grounds of my experiences with people, to come out of these problems with such divided societies, because uh, uh, I'm afraid that it may be murky in some way, but you know that I give you some one I mean interesting, I guess interesting example, that after the industrial revolution, during the final decades of the 19th century and at the beginning of the 20th century, there were various movement I mean grassroots movements, as you call it in America, throughout Europe, to to try to define anew the foundations of a society, of culture, where many things were questioned. Many of the tacitly accepted assumptions about society were questioned. But and there were many such movements throughout Europe, in Germany, in the UK, in England, then in France, and so on. But only the German movement was was able to create real leap, quantum leap in development of in human development, and therefore in technological and scientific development in Germany, because the entire movement was called how it was called. Sorry, I forgot. But one of the offshoots of it was called Reformpädagogik, which was concentrating on the changing education and perception of the child. And it succeeded, which could be seen from the inventions and the number of Nobel Prizes in Germany in the 1920s and 30s. Because what I wanted to say is that nowhere else it did succeed, because the main problem was such that what has turned out as a necessary condition for such a coming out of this trap was that the society has to be able to communicate through various layers.
Yes.
With the elites, with the because the so-called masses for themselves and unable to create any real solutions. They will create new ideologies, new how you would say ersatz in English. How
replacement
replacements. False solutions. So yes. What is because sorry for such a chaotic speech, but I more and more I'm starting to concentrate on what will be next and how people will be able to come out of this. And what is going on is dangerous in this way as well.
So what is next?
What is next? The first stage would be to realization of the errors made, that they have created such a problems and collapse of the entire societies and the entire states, I'm afraid. Because what's coming, I'm afraid, I'm not sure, but everything indicates that it is real, is the collapse of the financial systems in the West. And then when people will, because in fact it will mean that many people will lose what they have, and this will transform this societal or psychological regression into a new level, because it will reveal what has happened. Yes. with the people in full.
Yes.
And the problem will be then, and that's what I'm concentrating. In writing writing these books now mostly, is that how to come out of this. What will be then? And it will be shortly speaking. I'm sorry, but that it is such a incompressible. Not compressible, not comprehensible explanation. But what will be happening is that many so-called established truths will fall apart or will be devalued,
Yes.
and it will mean the reconstruction of the entire culture. In fact,
Yes.
what's coming, in my view, shortly speaking. I'm sorry for such a that I cannot explain everything from A to Z. You know,
But if you
uh,
build, we built the modern society on, there has been quite a lot of, oh heck, lies. There's been a lot of historical lies that have taken part of constructing the narrative that we call today's established world. And
mhm.
you're absolutely right that when you, it's just like Lincoln said, a house divided unto itself cannot stand. So the first thing for a country to erode is to not be able to communicate and have division within it.
And
And I see
and
deep division,
deep dysfunctions.
and which will exactly. And one of the things I see both in Europe and in America, it's the same thing, but it looks different in Europe because there's more facets of it. Is a lack of national pride. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to start waving the
Mhm.
flag or marching up and down the street. Uh,
Yes,
but you have to
but
love your country.
sorry for
Oh,
interrupting you, but it's just a part of a dissolution of the entire, you know, system through which people perceive the world,
yes.
the entire culture. You know, old values are no longer working, and so on.
And exactly. And but if you start actively teaching your young next generation, everything that's wrong with your country and not to love your country, if you have people in any country that no longer cares for their own nation, like we have politicians that no longer care for their own nation, then how are you going to keep the nation together? Now we are divided to the point where the very common
Mhm.
the thing that should bind everybody together, whether the German or Poland, well, you don't have Poland, you're better at this. If in European countries, in America, the one thing that we should be able to agree on is we love our country. It may have flaws, but we love it, and we are all American. We're all Germans. We're all this and that. But when that premise is attacked and taken apart, and we can't even agree on the very basis that this is our country, we need to take care of it, then
Yeah.
where do you stand? Then you have nothing to stand on.
Yes.
And that almost
It's
seems like a deliberate attack on patriotism around the world, on the Western
yeah.
world, because I see the Russians being quite proud of being Russians. And as you know, I love Poland. My impression of Poles is that you are quite damn proud of being Polish. And I always count Polish flags when I drive around in the suburbs. Um, let's not talk
But
about Warsaw.
there are not so many flags as in the United States, where I saw everywhere. I mean, I've been there last time after the 9/11, so they were on every home.
But if you go through Texas or Alabama or one of the a state where normal people live, you will see a lot more American flags than if you drive through Los Angeles. But you still see them. And the same thing when I'm in Poland, when I drive to Warszawa, yeah, I see a Polish flag here and there. When I get into the countryside, they're on every street. And
Maybe there was maybe there was some holiday, because I don't recall anything like
I,
this.
now you sound just like my friend I made a bet with, because she always said, "Oh, there's no Poles are not patriotic. There's no flags anywhere." So I started taking pictures of Polish flags everywhere because I see them everywhere. That's one of the things I love about Poland
There
is,
must have been some holiday.
oh, it's they're out there. They're out there.
But you know what you mentioned is that it's a one aspect of the uh, decay of the entire fabric of culture, of values. The same is going on with religion, for example. You know,
Yes.
and it's everywhere, and it's a you know, a sign of what's coming, because it's the system. I mean, the foundation of the societies are decaying in this way.
I mean, patriotism and religious beliefs were a large part of the foundational heritage of the Western civilized world. And when
Yeah.
you start eroding what people believed or what united them, well, then you get this. But it seems to
Hmm.
me that that erosion has been deliberately implanted It doesn't seem like something that grew organically, even if you go back 20, 30, 40 years. It looks like, and yes, I'm channeling Ivan Besimov, Yuri Besimov, just a little bit. I think it was a deliberate twist in that direction, and I don't know if it has taken on its own.
It was deliberate in such a sense that the authority always wanted to control the society, but it's not in such a way that they consciously aimed to, to create a disaster, because they will lose power at the end of this, and it's a collapse of of civilization, what we are talking about.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of the politicians doing this actively are aware of what they're doing. I'm saying the politicians today in the West are not as clever as they were 100 years ago. Um, I don't think they have any idea what they're doing at this
the,
point.
yes, they are materialized projections of the society,
Oh,
nothing else.
that's a very good line. Materialized projections.
Sorry.
I'm going to steal this. You are I like it. But it's true. If you look at, and the politicians weren't. Yes, they, well, before World War I. Yeah, okay, they made some mistakes, and then World War I happened. But they weren't dumb. They all acted out of. They were intelligent, meticulous people. And
you,
the same thing
you know
before.
yes, one of the, I'm afraid, when I'm listening to you now, uh, something came to my mind, that uh, one thing, one truth that will disappear after, at the end of this process, is that, there is a no widespread notion in the West, and especially in the United States, that you can create democracy. Uh, but in fact, it doesn't mean anything unless you have a people able to participate in it, and without that, it turns into a nightmare, and the complete dysfunction, destroying itself, and its people, its children, depriving them of the future, and so on. So
And it's
we just briefly, superficially touched the proverbial carpet under which this lurks.
and I think you're very right, and it's interesting because in America, people, the left will always refer to the American as democracy, whereas I will have to remind people we are not a democracy. Um,
My brother said it is capitalism.
well, it's a capitalist, but it's still not democracy. But remember what Benjamin Franklin said: democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for dinner. And I think that is what we're going to see in Germany now, because a representative democracy, representative means that everybody
Hmm.
proportionally of their votes gets to be in the government, and that is the opposite of what the Germans are doing now by rather linking up with their ideological enemies to keep out a patriotic party that got 20%. And we saw this in America. We have one side wins, we get one side completely hard, no handbrake to one direction. The other side wins, we go the other way. And again, you're right. It has to come from people agreeing on who they are and where they want to go. But they also have to have a feeling that they get a say in where their country gets to go. And my feeling, just like what you started by saying, people have less and less of an interest in what's going in the bigger picture because have
They live in a.
are they
I'm
so
sorry.
demoralized? Are they so demoralized they no longer care about trying to get involved because they just give up?
You know, most of what people believe in is a bubble of illusion. It's
Yeah.
uh, I don't know what to say else about it.
Joseph is doing something. for a couple of weeks, and he told me to check in with him in a couple of weeks, and we'll see if we can get all three of us on again. But
would would be
yeah,
nice.
regardless, I will see you when I come out to lovely Poland, and I still love Poland. I just there's so much common sense, and I particularly fan of your foreign secretary, your foreign minister who just brought a drone to our Minister of Defense. I saw.
Uh,
Uh,
there are no, this, such a situation of societal collapse is not, doesn't emerge out of blue sky, but it is usually, preceded by certain symptoms that are visible, more or less visible, and on this basis, I don't see any risk of such a thing in Poland. We don't, because first you will have to have deep divisions within society according to ethnic, religious, ideological, economical lines, which none of which basically exists in Poland.
no, I see that. That's why I want to have a little place in Poland. I see it as the most stable place I know, and the food is good.
there may be some protests or anything, but I don't see anything that would um, enable me to imagine any bloody revolution or anything like that. It's unimaginable. Sorry, I'm tired. Unimaginable.
I mean, I will say,
Um,
historically, for there to not be a Polish uprising, that would be almost wrong. I mean, you
it, you know,
historically the Poles rose up at any opportunity you have.
yes, but it gave us an inoculation, so to speak.
True.
We do have experiences in this field, if I may say so. So it yeah
Yes.
it's perceived, a perspective of an uprising or anything comparable as is perceived ambivalently.
Yes.
People realize that it also may have destructive aspects and so on,
Yeah.
which is quite a simple thing, but I'm not sure if the British, for example, are realizing such things.
The British, I think, is far closer to a state of civil war than most other
It's
countries.
they are quite close. Yeah,
And
one thing, by the way, that is suggesting that societal collapse is not far are the statistics of petty crimes, small
yeah,
crimes,
yeah,
which are rising very fast in the
yes.
United Kingdom.
I mean, the violence in general in Europe, and I know it's such a cliche to blame it all on mass immigration, but the statistics don't lie. Even if the
Mhm.
conservatives or the socialists don't want to talk about them, the statistics are still truthful. That's one thing I have to ask you because I need an intelligent person to help me dissect this question. And I unfortunately know, as you know, I wrote books for women on how to stay safe. I believe in chivalry. I believe that men should protect women and children as our very prime function for being men. We're stronger. We need to protect the women and children. That is all
Yeah,
we have to do. Everything else is secondary. That is my founding belief in life.
yeah,
We
okay.
now have two trains of thought in America and in Europe where mass immigration, violence against women and children is acceptable in order for their political goal. And every party that says we need to imprison criminals, we need to kick out criminal immigrants, are now vilified. And the strange thing to me is that women are increasingly single women are voting for the people who want to have the immigration and not punish those people. Why does women not want to vote for people who want to protect them? Yes.
You know what? I don't know how to say it shortly, but what has been predicted. I put it this way: what has been predicted. For example, there is a book written by a disciple of Carl Gustav Jung
Mm-hmm.
in 1949,
Mm-hmm.
whose name was Erich Neumann, and the English title for it is "The Origins and History of Consciousness." It's it may be difficult for some people, but it is the only such a description, professional, I mean, not on ideological grounds of any kind, who has predicted quite accurately what will be going on with Western societies, what is going on right now. And he has described, as I mentioned, this as a psychological description, but worth recommending. He has described it as one of the aspects of such societal or psychological regression, which, as I mentioned before at the beginning, consists in blocking effectively consciousness,
Oh.
is feminization. That men are losing the mm, masculine, traditional masculine traits.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in a psychological sense,
Yes.
which is visible, for example, in this, sex transitions, and in other ways as well. But also, when I was talking about it with a guy whom I would prefer not to describe too precisely, but he knows as well what is going on in the world. He has pointed my attention to the fact that on the other hand, we have a masculinization of women, which
Yes.
are taking more and more masculine ways. I mean roles in the
Yes.
society, and also in a psychological sense that they are more, authoritarian,
Yes.
more able um, to perform the roles associated with power.
Mm-hmm.
And I would explain it in such a way that we have a erosion of the model of men. I mean, as sex or gender,
Sure.
but also a transformation of women. That would be such a short explanation, a shortcut in a way. But I will not be able to explain it fully, because it's quite complex. So one has to know what is really going on, and I would have to refer to the Neumann's book, as I mentioned,
Okay.
"The Origins and History of Consciousness."
That's not a bad answer because it certainly has something to do with it.
I mean, what I would like to emphasize in for the end is that the changes that are going on, developing presently, are quite deep.
Yeah.
People don't underestimate the deepness and depth. I mean,
Yeah.
of what is going on, of how people are changing, how societies are changing, how deeply, and it's a very dangerous process. It hasn't, exploded in the face of people, in the faces, but
Yes.
it's dangerous.
Yeah.
If you have children in the school which don't see, of which at least in Poland about 30 or 50%, I don't remember the statistics exactly right now, but 30 or 50% of children in the elementary schools don't see a sense of life, unable to make uh, any choices on their own, other than replaying what they have been programmed with. Then it's a it's a thing that has a gloomy aspect as well,
Yes.
dangerous.
Yes.
It's creating as recent, I mean, German Chancellor Chancellor Olaf Scholz said he once used such a term, societal explosive material. It's a such a thing,
Yeah.
and it will be I mean, major problem. You know what the psychology of what will be going on. I mean, people don't see it yet because they do see economical hardships and they see polarization, but it will be the main, you know, aspect. I mean, uh, most painful for people from
Yeah.
the psychological aspect of what will be going on. Sorry again for saying that all that in such a chaotic way, but I'm quite tired today.
I will let you go to sleep then, and then next time we'll do it on my evening and your morning.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll see. I mean, in the end, I prefer evening anyway.
That's true. I mean, you get a chance to get more.
It's just today that I'm tired.
Oh, okay.
Just that.
Well, go get some sleep, man.
Okay. I mean, for the next week, I will not be able to sleep very well because
Ooh.
I will be very busy from tomorrow on.
Are you
But
writing
it
or are
doesn't
you
matter.
building your house?
I mean, I will have new books, and I have still today I have a lot of paperwork to prepare for them.
Uh, I'll- I you do you, the way I write is I will prepare everything over a year, and then I will write it all in a week. Is that how you do, or
I mean, it's hard to explain, but I just have some work to do.
go for it? All right, I'll let you get some sleep.